Listen closely, child of the present, for the wind does not whisper without reason, and the fire does not dance without a story to tell. Gather near, as our ancestors once did under the moon's patient gaze, when the night carried wisdom from one generation to another, and every tale was a path carved toward understanding the heart of man and the mysteries of fate. In a land where the red earth kissed the feet of the living, and the spirits walked unseen among the trees, there existed a village called Umuara, a place of beauty, of laughter, and of secrets buried deeper than the oldest baobab roots. In this village lived a young woman whose name traveled farther than the river during the rainy season, whose presence stirred hearts like the first drumbeat of a festival, and whose destiny would one day teach a lesson that even kings would bow their heads to hear. Her name was Adanna. But this is not merely the story of a woman, it is the story of a necklace, a simple ornament to the careless eye, yet a vessel of power so dangerous that even the spirits hesitated to speak of it openly. It was said that whoever wore this necklace would never know rejection, for every man who laid eyes upon her would fall helplessly in love, as though his heart had been stolen and hidden where no hand could retrieve it. But, my child, the elders say, what glitters in the night may be the eyes of a predator, and not every gift carries blessing within it. Some carry hunger, some carry sorrow, and some carry a price that only the foolish are eager to pay. How did this necklace come into Adanna's possession? Was it a blessing sent by kind spirits, or a trap laid by forces older than the hills themselves? And what becomes of a village when love is no longer a choice, but a spell? Sit still, and let your spirit be patient, for this tale will walk slowly, like a wise elder with a staff, revealing its truth step by step. Before the story unfolds, remember to follow the path of wisdom by joining this circle of stories at African Folktales Bispero, where the voices of the past speak to guide the future. Now listen, and listen well, for the fire has begun to speak, and once a story starts, it does not wait for those who are not ready. In the village of Umuara, where the mornings began with the songs of birds perched upon raffia roofs, and the evenings ended with the steady rhythm of drums echoing across the fields, Adanna lived a life that many admired but few truly understood. She was not the most beautiful maiden in the land, nor the richest, nor the daughter of a chief, yet there was something about her presence that lingered in the air long after she had passed, like the scent of rain before it touches the soil. The elders would often say, a person may not carry gold, yet still shine brighter than it. And Adanna was such a person. She was kind to the old, gentle with children, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that made even the proud pause in her presence. But kindness, my child, does not always protect one from the whispers of envy, and where admiration grows, jealousy often follows like a shadow that refuses to leave. Among the maidens of Umuara, there were those who watched Adanna with eyes that smiled in daylight but burned in silence when night came, for while men respected many women in the village, they seemed drawn to Adanna in a way they could not explain, seeking her company, offering gifts, and speaking her name as though it carried sweetness upon their tongues. Yet Adanna herself paid little attention to these things, for her heart was not restless like theirs, it was calm, like a river that knows its destination. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with colors only the spirits could fully understand, Adanna walked beyond the familiar paths of the village, carrying a small basket of herbs she had gathered for her mother. The forest ahead stood tall and watchful, its silence deeper than usual, as though it held its breath in anticipation of something yet to come. Now, the elders have always warned, the path that calls your name in silence may not lead you home, but youth often walks where wisdom hesitates. As Adanna stepped further into the forest, she began to notice something strange. The air had grown heavy, and even the insects, those tireless singers of the wild, had fallen quiet. Then, from the roots of an ancient iroko tree, she saw her, an old woman, bent and still, her eyes sharp like those who have seen more years than they should. The woman called out to Adanna in a voice that was both soft and commanding, like a secret that demanded to be heard. She spoke of destiny, of beauty unseen, of power hidden within ordinary things, and before Adanna could turn away, the old woman reached into a small pouch and brought forth a necklace, simple in appearance, yet glimmering with a light that did not belong to the sun. "Take it," the woman said, "for it will bring you the love of all who behold you." And in that moment, As the forest watched and the spirits listened, Adanna stood at the edge of a choice that would not only shape her fate, but the fate of everyone in Umuara. Adanna hesitated, for the words of her mother echoed faintly in her mind, reminding her that not every gift offered freely is meant to be received. Yet the glow of the necklace held her gaze as though it whispered directly to her spirit, promising a life untouched by rejection, untouched by loneliness, untouched by the quiet ache that so many women carried in silence. The old woman watched her carefully, her lips curved in a knowing smile that did not reach her eyes, and she spoke again, saying, "That destiny does not knock twice on the same door, that what is meant for a person must be taken when it appears, for the world does not wait for those who doubt." Adanna, young and untested by the deeper tricks of fate, reached out slowly, her fingers trembling not from fear but from curiosity, and as soon as her skin touched the necklace, a strange warmth traveled through her body. Settling deep within her chest like a fire that refused to be seen, she asked the old woman what must be given in return, but the woman only laughed softly and said that some gifts reveal their cost only when the owner begins to enjoy them. The forest seemed to exhale at those words, yet Adanna, not fully understanding, placed the necklace around her neck, and at that very moment the wind shifted, carrying with it a silence that felt heavier than before. When she turned to thank the old woman, she found that the place beneath the iroko tree was empty, as though no one had ever been there, and only the necklace remained to prove that the encounter was real. As Adanna made her way back to Umuara, she could not shake the feeling that something had changed, not just around her, but within her, as if her very presence had been touched by something unseen, something patient, something waiting. The next morning, Umuara woke as it always did, with laughter, movement, and the steady rhythm of life, but by midday, whispers had begun to move through the village like dry leaves carried by the wind, for wherever Adanna went, eyes followed, and not just with admiration, but with a deep, consuming desire that unsettled even those who felt it. Men who had never spoken more than a greeting to her now found themselves lingering near her path, offering help she did not ask for, bringing gifts she did not need, their voices softened and their pride forgotten as though something within them had been quietly taken. Even the most disciplined among them, hunters who had faced wild beasts without fear, found their hearts bending in her presence, unable to stand firm against a force they could not understand. The elders watched with concern, for they knew that love forced is not love at all, and one among them, an old man named Okeke, spoke quietly, saying that, when the drum beats without a drummer, the wise must ask who is truly playing the rhythm. Yet the village did not listen, for fascination often deafens the ears of reason. Adanna herself began to notice the change, and though at first she felt confusion, it slowly gave way to a strange comfort, a sense of power she had never known, for it is one thing to be admired, but another to be desired beyond control. Still, beneath that growing confidence, there remained a small voice within her, a quiet unease that asked a question she did not yet have the courage to answer. As days turned into weeks, the balance of Umuara began to crumble in ways both subtle and severe, for men who once tended their farms now spent their hours seeking Adanna's attention, neglecting their duties as though their purpose had shifted without their consent. Friendships weakened, as brothers began to compete with one another, each convinced that his love for Adanna was deeper, truer, more deserving than the rest. Even marriages, once held together by trust and shared struggle, began to fracture, for the wives of Umuara could not understand why their husbands looked upon them with fading affection while speaking Adanna's name with reverence. The marketplace, once filled with lively bargaining and laughter, grew tense, as arguments sparked easily and tempers rose quickly, all rooted in a desire that none could explain. Adanna, now fully aware of the effect she carried, found herself walking with a new kind of pride, her steps slower, her gaze more deliberate, for she had come to understand that the necklace did not merely attract attention, it commanded devotion. Yet with that realization came a shift in her spirit, for power, when tasted, often demands to be held on to, even when its cost begins to show itself. The elders gathered beneath the ancient tree and spoke in hushed tones, agreeing that something unnatural had entered their village, something that fed on the hearts of men. And though no one spoke the word aloud, they all felt the same truth pressing upon them like a storm waiting to break. It was Okeke who finally chose to act, for he had lived long enough to recognize the footprints of spirits that walk without being seen, and he knew that what had taken root in Umuara would not leave on its own. He called for Adanna, and when she stood before him, he did not speak with anger, but with the steady voice of one who has nothing left to fear, telling her that the necklace she wore carried a shadow that could not be hidden, that it had begun to consume the very fabric of their community. Adanna, now accustomed to admiration and resistant to challenge, laughed softly and asked if it was wrong to be loved, if it was a crime to receive what others so freely gave, and Okeke replied with a proverb that fell heavy upon the air, saying, "When the rain falls only on one roof, it is not a blessing but a warning." He urged her to remove the necklace, to return it to where it came from before its hunger grew beyond control, but Adanna refused, for the thought of returning to a life where she was no longer the center of every gaze filled her with a fear she had not known before. That night, the village did not sleep peacefully, for a tension hung over Umuara like a dark cloud, and in the silence, something unseen seemed to stir, as though the necklace itself was aware that its hold was being threatened. The breaking point came without warning, as such moments often do, when two young men, once close as brothers, found themselves standing face to face in the village square, their voices raised, their eyes filled not with reason but with a desperate need to claim what could never belong to either of them. Words turned to shoves, and shoves to blows, until the crowd gathered, unable to look away as the conflict escalated into something far more dangerous than a simple quarrel. Adanna stood at the edge, watching, her heart pounding as she realized that this was not admiration, not affection, but something twisted, something that stripped people of their will and left them hollow. When one of the men fell, blood staining the earth beneath him, the illusion shattered, and in that moment, Adanna felt the full weight of the necklace's cost pressing upon her spirit. The cries of the villagers rose around her, not in praise but in fear, in anger and grief, and she finally understood that what she had accepted in curiosity had grown into something that could destroy everything she had ever known. Without another word, she ran, her feet carrying her back toward the forest, toward the irako tree where it had all begun, the necklace heavy around her neck as though it resisted being taken from the world it had already begun to consume. The forest welcomed her not with silence this time, but with a stillness that felt like judgment, and beneath the ancient irako tree, the old woman appeared once more, as though she had been waiting all along for this moment to arrive. Adanna fell to her knees, her voice breaking as she begged to be freed from the burden she had so willingly accepted, confessing that what she thought was a blessing had become a curse that poisoned the hearts of those around her. The old woman listened her, expression unreadable, and then spoke slowly, reminding Adanna that every gift carries its truth within it, and that it is the responsibility of the one who accepts it to understand that truth before it takes root. With trembling hands, Adanna removed the necklace and placed it upon the ground, and as soon as it left her skin, the strange warmth vanished, replaced by a deep, humbling stillness. The old woman took the necklace, and in the same breath, she disappeared once more, leaving behind nothing but the quiet rustling of leaves. When Adanna returned to Umuara, the spell had been broken, and though the village began to heal, the scars of what had happened remained, a reminder of how easily desire can be twisted when guided by unnatural forces. Adanna herself was changed, no longer seeking admiration, but understanding the value of genuine connection, the kind that grows slowly and freely, without force or illusion. And so, my child, remember this as you walk your own path, that not all that brings you love is truly meant for you, and as the elders say, the heart that is captured by magic will one day long for the freedom of truth. If this story has spoken to your spirit, then sit again by this fire by following African Folktales Bispero, where wisdom lives in every tale, and every tale carries a lesson for those willing to listen.